This program is brought to you by the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii, a nonprofit organization dedicated to sharing with the community the many benefits of a vegetarian diet. Free monthly meetings include vegetarian experts found locally and on the mainland, quick and easy cooking demonstrations, and healthful and delicious food samples. Members enjoy an informative quarterly newsletter, social activities, and discounts at many vegetarian-friendly restaurants and health food stores. For an application, call 944-8344. That's 944-8344. Or visit our website at www.vsh.org. vsh.org.
I'd like to welcome you all to the monthly meeting of the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii. The Vegetarian Society is a not-for-profit volunteer educational organization founded in 1990 for the purpose of promoting human health, animal rights, and protection of the environment by means of vegetarian education. We are among the largest vegetarian societies in the country, with over 2,000 members. If you have any interest in becoming more involved with the Vegetarian Society, please speak with our volunteer director, Patrick. Wave your arm, there he is, after the meeting, and he can talk to you about how your interests and skills might match the needs of the Vegetarian Society. We have big-time, long-term positions available, and we have short-term, one-time, small tasks that need to be done as well. So any level on which you'd like to participate, I'm sure we can fit you in, and we will all benefit from our association with you. Refreshments tonight after the meeting are, again, courtesy of Down to Earth Natural Foods. We always are grateful to them for their generosity. It's now time for our special guest. We're happy to have with us tonight Dr. John Kelly. Dr. Kelly completed the dual MD MPH, that's Master of Public Health, degree program at Loma Linda University and is board certified by the American Board of Preventive Medicine. He's a research assistant professor in the Department of Nutrition in the Loma Linda University School of Public Health, where he is the lead researcher for the Lifestyle Research Initiative. He also holds a faculty appointment in the Department of Preventive Medicine in the Loma Linda University School of Medicine, where he's responsible for clinical research. His research interests focus on the rational application of lifestyle intervention in the treatment of disease, with special emphases on cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, insulin-resistant syndrome, and obesity. He's president of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, which is the medical specialty society for clinicians emphasizing therapeutic lifestyle interventions in the treatment of disease. His topic tonight is What's New in Plant-Based Nutrition? Please welcome Dr. John Kelly.
I hope you can hear me, but don't hesitate to let me know if I need to talk louder. Usually my wife takes care of that function, but if she doesn't, you just go right ahead. Sally, would you stand up? I want to introduce my wife, Sally Kelly. She's with me tonight. Thank you. That's kind. Here's a little cartoon that sort of gets us started. The sign there says fried stuff on a stick, and next to it, it's got the nutrition facts. I mean, how often do you see that? It says it won't kill you, not right away anyhow. Pedestrian there says, yeah, but at least it's a disclosure label that I can finally understand. So this topic of food and nutrition gets really complex. There's no doubt about it. The experts would agree to that, and certainly the amateurs among us could say the same thing. It is confusing. I think that my training in epidemiology has helped me probably more than about anything to be able to sort through some of that. There are answers that we don't have yet. We still got a lot more we need to learn. So my topic this evening is plant-based nutrition, medical and gene therapy, ? I think you're going to enjoy this topic. Here's my outline for what we're going to do. I'm going to share a little bit about my background, my pedigree, my qualifications to be here. We'll talk about nutrigenomics. It's a new field that is very relevant to the topic of plant foods, epigenetics, and then lifestyle medicine. And then we're going to talk about nutrition research. And what I think you'll find very interesting is I'm going to be looking at nutrition research. I'm going to be doing research on the research here with you tonight, some very interesting conclusions, and then some questions and answers. Well, I was a little bit older than this fella when I decided that I wanted to be a vegetarian, but I could see his logic. Here we've got mama bird feeding worms to baby bird, and he says, if I was a baby bird, I think I'd be a vegetarian. I have the privilege with my wife of being co-founders of the Eden Way Place. This was a vegan cafe and healthy food shop and whole grain bakery that a number of us worked on in Roanoke, Virginia years ago. I became a vegetarian in 1975 and a vegan in 1977, and we opened this in 1990. We had health classes there. In fact, there's a picture of my wife, Sally, at the podium there and giving some classes. Just a little about myself. I had some tremendous improvements in my personal health after adopting a plant diet back in 1975. In my own case, the one thing that was most prominent to me was pretty much every year I could count on needing to get some penicillin because I would get strep throat. To this day, I don't know why, but I know that was a typical pattern. And after I adopted a plant-based diet, I've actually never had another case of strep throat in the wintertime. So you can see why I associate those two together. But anyway, that really ignited a lifelong interest I've had in diet, lifestyle, and health. It struck me as compelling that a change in my lifestyle could make such a change in my health, and very interesting. So I've really been doing health education since 1977, and I completed my medical education in 2003. So most of my health education work was as a layman. Medical education is a recent thing for me. I started medical school when I was 48, so I was kind of old for that. And now I'm conducting research on therapeutic lifestyle changes in the treatment of disease. And it's some of the most interesting thing that I can imagine doing, quite frankly. I wish I could share all night with you the things that we're learning. Here's a group picture of the first cohort of subjects that we had in the Marshall Islands. You can see we're clowning around a little bit there. It was and you can see some of you who know Brenda Davis, she's our dietitian, nutritionist on here. She's on the far left. We've stuck her picture in because I don't know, I think she must have been taking the picture. I know she was there, so I'm not sure how she wasn't in the picture, but anyway. This is the Republic of the Marshall Islands Diabetes Wellness Project. It's a congressionally funded study. We're basically looking at about 150 diabetics, and that's with a hemoglobin A1C that's greater than 8. They're being randomized, so it's a randomized study. One group is going to receive comprehensive lifestyle interventions, a low cholesterol, high fiber, plant-based diet, and exercise. And the other group is going to get optimal usual care. We're going to give the test results of their labs to the Ministry of Health. They get pedometers to wear just like the intervention group, and some of them will actually have PBSM as personal blood sugar monitoring that they will do. So we're going to use plant foods to treat diabetes. A few years ago, this would have, a couple of decades ago, probably would have been laughed out of medical circles, such a statement, but it's actually very scientific and very valid hypothesis these days. We use a simple approach. You know, one thing I really am learning about working with the research in the Marshall Islands is good for me. I kind of think most of us adults ought to spend a few years working with children because we learn a whole lot of stuff from kids that we've forgotten from when we were kids. Working with them has helped me simplify things quite a bit. It's very important. I have a tendency, I don't know about you, I have a tendency to make things too complicated in life. And so we have a very simple system, and that is we tell them when you fly with us, we want to upgrade you to first class. So we have the foods classified in 4 classes. And here's an illustration. We put first class foods are vegetables, fruits, nuts, whole grains, legumes, and seeds. And you'll notice in the second class, there's sometimes people look at our second class and they say, wow, I don't think that tofu is second class food, or whatever may be your favorite thing. We find that this is not an ideal food. It's too processed. We would rather see the people eat the soybean than to eat the tofu. That's not to say, however, that tofu is not better than third-class foods. We're also using exercise. Exercise is a very important part of the lifestyle changes that we need. So let me now turn a corner just a little bit. I want to talk to you about some of the studies. Why do we do this? What is the rationale for doing such a intervention? Here's a study that was published recently about using a low-fat vegan diet to treat diabetes. It was a prospective trial. They were randomized into 2 groups. 49 of these people were assigned to an experimental group, and here's what they received. There was a 10% fat, 15% protein, about 75% complex carbohydrate. The diet was mostly vegetables, fruits, grains, and legumes. And 50 were put on an American Diabetes Association diet. This is the control group. 15 to 20% protein, less than 7% of saturated fat, 60 to 70% carbohydrate, these monounsaturated fatty acids, and cholesterol less than 200 milligrams a day. So this was published, you can see, by Neil Barnard and all in Diabetes Care 2006. And here we have the hemoglobin A1C changes over the 22 weeks. Notice the blue are the vegan diet, and the red are the lighter looking ones here. Yeah, it's sort of red. That's the American Diabetes Association diet. And you can see a significant difference, and what I find most prominent here is that look what happened at 11 weeks. In other words, between the beginning and 11 weeks, at 11 weeks there's been quite a drop in both groups, but then at the 11th week there's a change, and the ADA, people on the ADA diet actually started to regress, started to have an increase in their hemoglobin A1C, whereas those on the low-fat vegan diet continued the decrease. I'm sure we're going to see more of the results and more analyses coming out of this work. This phenomena of what we see often in lifestyle change in studies is there is an initial drop, there's an initial improvement that isn't always well sustained over time. People tend to regress. And so this is notable that the vegan diet group continued their progress. I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. Now, I mentioned that I was going to talk about nutrigenomics. This is a new word that's been coined from the terms nutrient and genomics. It's really an emerging science that's built around the discovery that nutrient intake modulates the genome. The genome is a term that we use to express the genes and all the associated molecules that have to do with expressing those genes, that DNA. Now, think about it. We all know that all cells in the human body come from a single cell, right? And they all have identical copies of DNA. And we also know that the various cells behave quite differently, although they all have a copy of the same DNA. Your eye is very different from your nose, very different from your toenail. I mean, it's common sense. We've known this, but most of us haven't stopped to think about the implications of that simple fact. So each cell in our body is a copy of the same DNA, came from mom and dad, biological mom and dad, and yet our cells behave very differently. So there's a couple of very important conclusions that come from this. So what I want to do is let's do a brief refresher on genomics, okay? Some of you it's a refresher, some of you maybe this will be new stuff. Deoxyribonucleic acid, you can see why we call it DNA, is the megamolecule of Mendelian inheritance. This is the This is the molecule. By the way, the discovery of that fact is not a trivial thing. The men that discovered this won a Nobel Prize, Watson and Crick. So this is a major thing, and I believe it was 1953 or 4 that they published their work on that. For the longest time, it was thought that it must be protein that was the source of this, because this molecule, this deoxyribonucleic acid, is so simple. I mean, there's nothing to it. It's made out of 4 phosphate bases, and how could it contain all the information, to make a single cell into a human being? What we underestimated was the significance that it's multiple miles long. The one strand of DNA in each of your cells is multiple miles in length. So when you put that much together, you can imagine even with just 4 digits, you could record an awful lot of information. Well, anyway, then there was the sequencing of the human DNA, and that was heralded to great fanfare. It's almost 10 years now since that was done. That's a wonderful task. All that really means, though, is that we now know the sequence of those bases in this multiple mile long molecule. However, few, even among the most advanced molecular geneticists, realize the complexity of the human genome. We still do not grasp its complexities. We are constantly learning new magnitudes of order of complexity to this. And sequencing this multi-billion base genome is still a long ways from finding the individual genes. You can read in the science the papers that are coming now. In the beginning, we didn't see this so much, but the papers coming now are acknowledging this is hard stuff. We thought it was going to be really pretty easy. I mean, we get a sequence and we just start figuring this out. It's pretty hard stuff. This little picture right here shows you something. Do you realize that that there's a twisted strand, right? There's a paired strand. That's how DNA, and it makes a sort of a helix. But did you know that the 2 strands are actually not chemically bound to each other? There's no valent electrical bond between them. They're simply held together by hydrogen bond forces. These things sort of unzip like a zipper fairly easily, and then they fit back together. And that's why if you look at this picture here is nice because it's fairly accurate. There's no direct connection. Do you notice that between the 2 strands? Look right in here where you can see between it. There's no link. That's just a hydrogen bond. These molecules are paired in such a way that they like to sit next to each other. It's a lower energy state than when you separate them. So you can begin to imagine stabilizing, manipulating, transcribing this multi-mile long piece of tape, okay? It's like a piece of tape. It's no small task. I mean, it requires thousands of specialized nanotools. And I have some pictures here. This is a histone here. Histones and chaperone proteins are some of the things that we know of that are contained in the cell that manipulate this DNA, this multi-mile long code of who you are. And there are others that we're still discovering. Down here is, notice this. I like this one. It looks a little bit like a Christmas wreath, sort of. In these pictures on here, I don't know if you can see the blue and the red. Yeah, this shows up a little bit. The blue is the bases and the red are the acid. And these chaperone molecules manage this huge, long DNA megamolecule. Okay, why is this important? You're going to see in a minute. Okay, it's obvious that DNA genes can be turned on and off. We talked, remember a while ago, that every cell has the same DNA, but not every cell is an eye. Not every cell is part of your ear. Not every cell is part of your toenail. Well, science is desperately seeking. We want to understand how to switch genes on and off. This would be a very powerful, important thing we'd like to know. And in the process, one thing that we've discovered is that diet or nutrients exert one of the strongest effects on gene expression. Interesting. Not very sexy, not exactly what we were thinking we were going to find, But what you eat has a major impact on the expression of DNA in your body. And so Nutrigenomics is trying to exploit that fact. Turns out not all diets or all foods are created equal. You know that. Foods do different things to the genome. There are differences, for example, between certain animal foods. Not all animal foods have the same effect. And there's differences between the plant foods. This is a notable point, is that the greatest differences seem to exist between plant food and animal food. There are differences between all of them, but there's a greater difference between animal foods and plant foods and how they affect the expression of our genome. Here's a statement I just found. This was published in July 26th. I don't see the date up here, but I remember July 26th was the date this year. Notice what it says. The last decade has witnessed an exponential increase in the number of studies investigating how different components of the diet interact at the molecular and cellular level to determine the fate of a cell. It is now apparent that many dietary chemopreventive agents with promise for human consumption can also preferentially inhibit the growth of tumor cells by targeting one or more signaling intermediates leading to induction of apoptosis. Apoptosis is a healthy cell death. That's the way the body fights cancer, by and large, is it induces a cancerous cell to obliterate itself, to apoptosis. Now, this is a kind of a, for some of you, this sounds kind of technical. This is from Carcinogenesis, a leading journal on cancer research. Carcinogenesis is, of course, the causes or the beginning of cancer. And here we have something that 10 years ago would have been controversial, would have been radical. I mean, if I would have stood up here, or certainly 20 years ago, stood up and said those kind of things, I would have been considered, well, maybe I shouldn't, what am I doing, what's my business being a doctor, you know? This guy is talking like a radical idiot. But the fact is, then I'm going to show you the studies here in a few minutes where I've analyzed the studies on nutrition and plant foods. And as he says right here, what does it say? The last decade has witnessed an exponential increase in the number of studies. So I'm going to show you a little bit more about that in a minute. Okay, but before I do, I want to talk to you about epigenetics, because if you think nutrigenomics is a significant factor about diet and genes, epigenetics is perhaps even more amazing. This is the emerging science built around the discovery of transgenerational genomic effects. Now, some of you are thinking fast along with anyway, you're thinking fast enough to realize, well, I thought the genetic effects were transgenerational, means across the generations. Yes, but we're found that there are environmental effects that are transgenerational. See, environmental influences have long been known to exert phenotypic effects, like smoking. Long been recognized smoking causes lung cancer. Smoking, you may or may not be aware, causes birth defects, causes osteoporosis, causes all kinds of problems, heart disease. And those are phenotypic. They are changing the outward characteristics of the organism. They're not changing the DNA. Okay? And in fact, by definition, that's how we define this. Environmental effects are non-heritable effects. Heritable effects are genetic rather than environmental. That's the way one of the basic dogma of how we define genetics and environmental effects. All right. So, turns out that, as I said a minute ago, genes are turned on and off by environmental influences. Okay? How you eat, etc., exercise. These are being mapped out, by the way. We're mapping out what kind of genes are getting turned on and off by exercise and by diet. And this is very interesting. Now, follow me. The genes can be switched on or off transgenerationally across generations. Now, this was this was an amazing finding. We knew that environmental effects could switch on your genes. What we were quite surprised to find is that they can switch on and off the genes of your children and your grandchildren. Follow me here in a minute. So the progeny start life with the gene switch positioned by environmental influences exerted upon the ancestors. Turns out the genome is much more than mere DNA. As I said, this host of molecular forces interacts to control what we think of as the genome. And some of these involve these permanent but reversible chemical changes. Now follow. For example, attaching carbon groups to the DNA, which I've shown up here. Yes, so it's kind of hard to see. The picture's a little dark. But right in here I've got some methyl groups on this. These chemical bonds, this is an actual chemical bond. Now, the point I wanted to make about it earlier is that the DNA is only linked by hydrogen bonds, which are not chemical bonds, and they're easily, water is held together by hydrogen bonds. If you want an illustration of how strong it is, water is held together by hydrogen bonds, and you can stick your hand right in water, right? You can swim in it, you can move around. It seems weak in one sense, but in reality it's strong enough to pull water up these huge trees. That's how it gets up there, is by this capillary action from the hydrogen bonds. Well, these are chemical bonds, and chemical bonds are stable bonds. They stay there until something reverses them. And so these bonds are stable until they're reset by environmental influences. Okay, this was the earth-shaking experiment that got us started on this. I've got a picture here of a mouse. It's one of the mice that they use in human experimentation. A lot of us are not very excited about that. I've got this $sign on it. What's the price you would put on a mouse? Well, not too many days ago, hopefully nobody here will throw cabbage, but I caught a mouse in a trap at home, and I discarded that mouse as useless. I don't like to kill even mice, but I don't like mice in my living quarters. And so a mouse is probably not considered to have much of a price at all. Well, now here I have two mice. One of these mice is worth more than any car that's parked in the parking lot. The other is just as cheap as the one that I threw out of the trap the other day. I think actually it's the ugly one. But anyway, the blonde, the large blonde, is called a Goody mouse. And this mouse is so valuable because lots of work has been done genetically engineering this mouse so that it gets human diseases. It gets obese, it gets diabetic, it gets high blood pressure, it gets heart disease, it gets all kind of human diseases. And I'm not here to talk to you about the ethics of whether we should have ever done that to a mouse, but we did, we humans. And they've been studied and experimented on, mostly, of course, to study medications, because that's what most people think the solution to this problem is. But in the year 2000, a professor at Duke University and a research fellow decided to try something far out. And that was, they decided to see if they could cure the diseases bred into this agouti mouse with lifestyle and diet changes. So I thought, well, at least this mouse had a chance to be in a halfway decent kind of a study, and that is, it was a lifestyle study instead of being poked and prodded and everything else that we do to them. And the results were quite phenomenal. They were actually able to, indeed, with lifestyle change, get this mother, this agouti mouse that was here, that's pictured as a mother, to largely control her diabetes, her blood pressure, her heart disease, and so on. Lifestyle was effective. But what was really earth-shaking was when she had a baby. When she had a baby, we discovered, see, what I've just described to you so far is nutrigenomics, right? We changed her nutrients and it changed her DNA expression. That's nutrigenomics. When she had a baby, we learned something else very unexpected. Okay, so she's the valuable one. She had a baby. Well, actually, I believe they suspected lab error. They think that they were thinking somebody got in the wrong cage. But anyway, the baby didn't look like mama. And actually, subsequent testing revealed that mama and baby have the same DNA. But the mama's change is transgenerational. The methylization on her DNA prevented her baby from being born with the phenotypic attributes that should have been present from her genotype. And it was transgenerational for up to 3 to 4 subsequent generations of babies. Now, could the baby eat in a way that could induce mama's genes to be expressed? Absolutely. If that baby's diet and lifestyle was changed, it would begin to look like mama. So, I don't know if there's any mothers here, but any ladies of childbearing age, this is information you should be taking to heart. If not, maybe grandmothers should be helped. But this is really earth-shaking. This wonderful, I call it a wonderful experiment, where the Goody mice found some environmental phenotypes were heritable up to 3 and 4 generations. The specific phenotypes in this study were induced using a designer DNA methylating diet, okay? This is not the typical diet that you or I would eat, but it was designed to produce the results we saw. And the implications really are staggering. How we eat, how I eat, can transmit effects to the 3rd and 4th generation. And of course, it can actually be more, it can transfer changes longer than that if you stop and think about it. And I want to turn to, because I'm no longer bearing children, and my wife's probably happy about that. I am still making transgenerational changes, and I'm trying to make some tonight. If any of you here are in a younger generation than I am, I'm trying to change the way you express your genes so that they'll be a little healthier than your parents were and healthier than mine. In fact, how I use this, I'm getting off of the prepared notes here a moment, but how I use this as a practicing physician is, people ask me, what kind of doctor are you? And I say, well, I'm a medical doctor. And say, well, what kind of medicine do you practice? I say, well, I practice lifestyle medicine. And say, well, what is that? What do you treat? And I say, well, I treat the volition. You know, the urologist treats the bladder and the kidney and so forth. Surgeons work on cutting things. Well, I work on the volition. And what I find in working on the volition is something Hans Deal calls non-invasive brain surgery. But what I try in working on the volition is I need to reach your intelligence, center of intelligence. I need to inform you with information that is convincing to you, that you say, yes, that makes sense, I agree with that, I'm going to go with that, I believe that's right. And then the second thing is to empower you to make a change, to change your actions based on the new information, right? I mean, that's what volition is all about. Volition is the will or the doing of something, the action, the deciding and the doing of it. And so I use this information, this study, with my patients because I want them to see how powerful a change in their lifestyle can be. Because so many times what I find people, they, well, yeah, it would be nice, but I'm already 65 years old, it's too late for me. No, it doesn't matter if you're 85 years old, it's not too late for you. And I could cite stories of that. And we have some he's sitting here tonight that can tell us that it's never too late to, well, Karl Barth said it really well. Karl Barth said, though no one can go back and make a brand new start, my friend, anyone can start from now and make a brand new end. And we need to keep that in mind. Yes, you cannot go back and make a brand new start, but you can make a brand new end. And that's really what matters. The start's behind us. It's the end that's still in the future. Well, anyway, lifestyle medicine. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. I practice lifestyle medicine. It's the use of therapeutic lifestyle interventions in the treatment and management of disease. And I would say to you, and as I say to many of my colleagues whom I speak to, like I was giving a grand rounds at Castle today at noon, I believe this is the most rational medicine there is. Why would we do medicine and not treat causes? And to me, this is what we're doing here. We're treating primary causes of illness. So much of what we do in medicine is we treat symptoms, which of course, if they're in danger of killing the person, I'm all for saving life. But the problem is that oftentimes we treat symptoms and we make disease livable. Actually, it's not livable. We're making it diable. But anyway, we make it so that people think they're okay as they continue to die. And That's unacceptable. So lifestyle medicine uses therapeutic lifestyle interventions to treat and manage disease. It's a relatively new specialty area, emphasizing the use of lifestyle interventions as medical treatment. Really, it has grown out of the research that I'm going to show you here and that I've already talked about on the effects of using diet and exercise. The American College of Lifestyle Medicine promoting the science, education, and practice of lifestyle medicine. There's our website if you want to go visit that or send some of your doctor friends there, www.aclm.net. It would be aclm.org, but aclm.org is the American College of Legal Medicine, and they came into existence before we did. I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but so we're aclm.net. Enough about that. Let's look at lifestyle medicine. Now here I have the causes of death, the leading causes of death in the United States. This is from the CDC Burden of Chronic Disease Report, year 2000. And as we all know, heart disease is the leading cause of death in the United States. I think you know probably that all cancers are second leading cause, stroke, lung disease, and so on. But this is what, let me ask you, if a person dies of lung cancer, what did they die of? They didn't die of lung cancer. They died of something that caused lung cancer, okay? That was what we call the proximal cause. Well, now I want to show you three ultimate causes. Let's start with smoking. This is an approximation. We don't have exact studies, but based on an expert interpretation, this is the approximation of the amount of heart disease caused by smoking, the amount of all cancers caused by smoking, etc. Poor diet and inactivity, and then last, alcohol drinking, especially what I would call excessive alcohol. There's plenty of studies that indicate that there's a J curve. For example, that a little bit of maybe a glass or two of wine a day may be protective to heart disease. Did you know that the same dosing of wine is harmful? There's a straight line harm as far as cancer is concerned and many other diseases. So I guess you could drink some wine and maybe help your heart, but die a little sooner with cancer. Anyway, my point is I don't know of any solid evidence that says that drinking alcohol actually is, in a net effect, a benefit. How about the lifestyle heart trial? The question was asked, can lifestyle changes reverse coronary heart disease? Now, many of you this study was done this is almost 2 decades ago, so I'm not surprised a lot of you know what the answer is. But when it was done, it was considered radical. Hey, these blockages are calcified. They're like concrete. What are you talking about? Are they reversible? The stuff is like, it shows up on a CT scan, you know? It looks like bone. This is like bone plating the arteries, and you're going to ask if that's reversible? Yeah, we did. We asked that, thankfully. And we now know that it is reversible. Let's see what the results were. They had 28 patients that were assigned to the experimental group. It was a low-fat vegetarian diet, stress management, moderate exercise, and the usual care group. This was done by Ornish and published in 1990. You would think that we might have been a little further along by now. But anyway, this was published going on 17, 18 years ago. Now, here's the results, the 1-year results. And on the left, we have the control group, the usual care, and on the right, the treatment group, okay? And what we're going to show is the percent change. So if the blockages got worse, the bar is going to go above the line, right? And if the blockages get smaller, it's going to go below the line. So what we have here is all blockages in the control group. This was blinded angiographic studies that were read by experts who did not know which group they were reading. And they had an 8% increase in all blockages, while in the treatment group they had a 5.5% decrease. But now, you may not be aware, but it's actually the blockages that are beyond 50%, actually 70, 80% is where you start to have problems. There's enough redundancy in the circulatory system that for most of us, especially sedentary people, you wouldn't even know you had heart disease until the blockage gets well over 50%. If you're a real active athlete, you might be aware of it close to 50%. So what we were now going to do is look at the worst blockages. What happened? How did they happen? So the red color. Well, in the controls, they went up less. They only went up about 4.5%. So that's good news. The worst blockages didn't get so much worse. But in the treatment group, the worst blockages improved the most. And what we've discovered by many studies since this one was published is that lifestyle changes involving diet have a stronger effect, beneficial effect, on the worse the disease. So the worse the disease is, the more effective the intervention will be. I mean, if we could design a medicine like that, I could retire very soon, couldn't I, Dr. Harris? I mean, if I could design a medicine that I could give the same amount to every person in the room, and it would self-adjust so that the people who had the worst blood pressure, it would have the strongest effect on, and the people whose blood pressure was about normal, it wouldn't have any effect on. Wow. I mean, we could just dose everybody the same. That's how lifestyle works. Lifestyle change is stronger in the worse the disease, and a milder effect the more normal the person's health. It's actually a very safe treatment. There's side effects are minimal to none. Okay, so people say, okay, well, 1 year. I mean, a lot of people can do something for 1 year, but let's see what happens if you track this. So in 1998, Ornish published the 5-year results. So this is just looking at percent change in the controls. It was 27, almost 28% worse, while in the treatment group, it was about 8%. Now, for the medical types here, let me just ask a question. What's happening in plain layman's terms? Tell the audience in layman's terms. You know, you really don't have to answer this. But is happening in the control group? What in plain English? What's happening to the red group? They're dying of heart disease. They're getting usual care. They're under doctor's care, and they're dying of their disease. I don't know if there's any other doctors here or nurses in the audience, but I don't like my patients to die for what I'm treating them for. My preference is that my patients get well. And my point is, this is unacceptable. This is unacceptable. And especially it's unacceptable when we have a treatment that works. So ask your doctor, or have your friends ask their doctor, because the American system, the way it is, and I can tell you this as a physician. And also, by the way, before I went into medicine, I used to work in health insurance for Blue Cross and Blue Shield. I know a little bit about that too. And we have a system where the consumer has the most power. You have the most influence to change the system. You have more influence than the doctors do. So I want to encourage you to ask this question. Why should me and my loved ones and my friends be on an intervention that has been shown not to be effective when there is another intervention that has been shown to be effective? Ask that question. Isn't that a reasonable question? And here it shows the dose response. Some of the people on the program did better than others. And what he did was they did the analyses to show that there was a correlation that the more adherent they were, you'll see on the left here, this column is the most adherent subjects had the best results, and the least adherent had the worst or the less desirable results. How about this study here? Dr. Jenkins up in Toronto, they decided to compare diet to medicine to treat high cholesterol. I don't know if anybody here has got high cholesterol, knows someone with it, but if you do, this might be very relevant to you. So they took 46 subjects that had high cholesterol, and you can see their BMI they were overweight, almost 60 years old, half women, mostly Caucasian. They were randomly assigned to receive either a step 2 diet, that's the more aggressive diet for heart disease, that's low saturated fat, low fat dairy. Step 2 diet, that same diet, plus they got a pill, lovastatin, medicine, to treat their cholesterol. This is a typical starting dose. And the third group got there's no medicine there, by the way, they got a portfolio diet of things that had been shown individually to lower cholesterol. So they put them all together in a portfolio, that's why they call it. So they had plant sterols, 2 grams. These are all per 2,000 kilocalories. That would be a typical kilocalories for a male actually a male that's either working very hard or overeating. Soy protein is 43 grams, viscous fibers 20 grams, and almonds 28 grams. So what do you think the results were from this? Here we see figure 2 from the article that was published in the Journal of American Medical Association in July of 2003. And this is low-density cholesterol on the left. That's the bad cholesterol, so-called. And here's the LDL to HDL ratio. That's the bad to good. So what you want is a low ratio there. And what we find is that the lovastatin group at the bottom and the portfolio group they were significantly better than the step 2 controls. The controls are up here in the red sphere, ellipse, and there was really no significant difference between the lovastatin group and the ones on the portfolio diet. There's the data right there. There was no statistically significant difference in the reduction in cholesterol with the ones that had the lovastatin versus the group that had the portfolio diet. Harvard has done a lot of studies on this. They have the Nurses' Health Study of over 85,000 nurses, and in their health professional follow-up study, HPFS, they have about 42,000 physicians and dentists. They've done some studies, and they found that each daily serving of fruits and vegetables reduced the risk of heart disease by 4%, a relative risk of 0.96, and the p-value very significant. So here you see the results. So every daily serving, now that's talking about, that's if you eat, your average, you're eating 4 servings, let's say, and you change that to you're eating 5 servings a day, not just one day. You didn't just do it on Monday, but daily. You eat 5 servings. Now, the data shows that you reduce your risk of heart disease by 4%. I'm looking forward to some intervention trials to confirm this, but the evidence is pretty solid that this is going to be there. Maybe you've seen this little cartoon. It says, well, it seems your weight is perfect. You just happen to be 11 feet too short. I have patients that appreciate the humor in this. We do have a weight problem. But did you know there's strong, consistent evidence that plant foods are associated with leaner body weight? Body mass indexes consistently across the world. I've seen this study in the U.S. I've seen it in Europe. We're seeing it in India, China data. Body mass index is inversely associated with proportion of plant foods in the diet. The more the plant foods, the lower the BMI. And so I use, when I have people who I treat as a physician and they are wanting to lose weight, first thing I tell them is you must eat more. Now that, of course, usually takes them by surprise, and that's part of what you need to do. Hans Diehl says we're practicing the rhythm method of girth control in our country because we have this ratcheting effect. We lose weight, and then we reward ourselves, and we gain more than we started with, and then we lose again because, well, now I'm too heavy, and then we reward ourselves. The rhythm method of girth control doesn't work. But when I tell them, I want you to eat more to lose weight, and of course I prescribe for them plant foods because the overwhelming evidence is that if they will increase the amount of plants they're eating, they'll have less heart disease, lower cholesterol, they'll have also less weight. And the second thing I tell them is that we're not going to worry about your weight. Stop worrying about weight. It's a symptom. It's not a disease. If you put your lifestyle into a healthy order, weight will become a non-issue. It's true. See it all the time. But if you focus on it, you end up treating the wrong thing. Oftentimes you don't treat the real cause. You're treating symptoms. Trying to put the cookies so high that you can't reach them. That's silly. If you put them up there, you can go get them. What we have to do is change our philosophy about life, and one of the simplest ones is to eat plants. Eat plants. It's one of the best weight control systems we know of. We're going to now we're going to use epidemiology to analyze the studies published in the medical literature on nutrition. So we're going to use the tools that help us figure out what is a risk factor for disease, and we're going to use that tool to look at the studies that have been published in the literature about nutrition. Because one of the things I hear sometimes is people say, well, this vegetarian stuff hasn't been studied very well. I'm not really sure whether it makes sense or is it safe. I don't know, almost every time I give a talk at a conference somewhere about diet and the audience decide that I know something about what I'm talking about, I get some mothers that come up and ask me about the health of their daughter or son who's become a vegetarian, and they are very concerned about, and I'm not in any way trying to make fun or belittle that. I think it's great that parents are concerned about their children's health, but they're largely worrying about the wrong thing. They're worrying about, well, how is she going to get enough protein? And the fact of the matter is, one of the worst things that's happening to young ladies in our society is they're getting so much protein that they're having osteoporosis. And we got to change that. So she's worrying about the wrong problem. But anyway, so let's look at this. We're going to look at the patterns in this enormous body of published research, and we're going to see some amazing and important trends. Here's the annual publication rate of plant diet articles in nutrition journals and non-nutrition journals from 1966 through 1995. Okay? And what we're going to look at here is first is the nutrition journals. Well, hey, look at that. Started off kind of low in the 66 to 70 and climbed, right? And there's a nice climb. Looks like it peaked and started to wane. So I guess they found what they needed to know and they were no longer interested. Why did that go down? Well, let me show you what happened. When we now look at the non-nutrition journal articles, we find that there's been no drop at all in the total number. What's happened is that the research has moved from nutrition research to non-nutrition. Now, what in the world, what non-nutrition research are we talking about that's grown so much? Here's the ratio of plant-based nutrition articles to the total number of articles indexed in Medline, and you can see that it's running somewhere around 20% for some time. Well, let me show you where the articles are coming from. Oh, by the way, here's the different kinds: case series design, cross-section, clinical trials, case or case control, cohort or case control. What we have here, those of you who are in research know that the sequence across here is we use case series design and cross-sectional studies for observation and for early studies. And then as we get more into studying, the intervention trials are over here, okay? And so that's what's happened. In the early decades, we were doing mostly these early studies, and as we look later on in time, we see that we're now doing look at the change in clinical trials. Started off low, higher and higher. So what's happened is the articles are being published in medical journals. Medical journals are considered non-nutrition journals. And so here's an example of the themes. Nutritional adequacy, preventive and therapeutic has gone very high. And then I broke it down here. So nutritional adequacy changed, and look at the difference. While that started to plateau, the preventive and therapeutic articles have skyrocketed. And really, since 1995, in the decade or 12 years since then, the trend is continuing. This is just more of the same thing. So this is the concluding summary of the authors. In the past 30 years, scientific endeavors in the area of vegetarian nutrition seem to have progressively shifted from investigating concerns held by nutritionists and other health professionals to a fertile area of investigation in which creative solutions for various medical conditions and preventive approaches to chronic diseases may be found. There is one thing I would say about soy that makes it difficult to come to a conclusion. And that is, you can study soy Pringles, soy beans, you could study soy tofu, and you might get different conclusions about the impact of soy on health, and you've studied soy 3 times. The kind of soy, and I'm not talking right now about the kind of bean, I'm talking about the amount of processing that the soy went through before the human consumed it, is a factor that I believe has not been adequately controlled for. And we need to not compare highly refined soy products to less refined soy products. Refining has already been shown to be detrimental in general to health. So to compare 2 products to each other, which are different levels of refinement, is not going to allow us to separate out whether the food itself is okay, because we're introducing the confounding factor of refining or processing. My own take is that soy beans are an excellent, healthy food, and I think the less processed, the better they are, and the studies I see and I share with my patients indicates that to be the case. But I would say another thing, very important, for any of you who are addicted to soybeans, there's no minimum daily requirement of soybeans. You can live without ever putting a soybean in your mouth, and so don't feel like you have to use soybeans. And if you're allergic, please don't use them. So my point there is that people will say to me, well, I'm allergic to soy, so what can I use? And I said, well, don't use soy. Use a nut milk or use I use blended fruit. I like to just take apple and banana and some grapes and put in a blender and blend them up a little bit and put them on my cereal. I don't need milk. The other thing you asked was about excess calories. This is a far bigger problem that we have than too much soy. Although I believe you can overeat on soy. And the best way to do that, by the way, is to highly refine it. You can overeat on it's easier to overeat any food if you will highly refine it before you start eating it. It makes it easier. The body's signal that it sends to the apostat to say, hey, we've had enough, you're satisfied, is largely based on volume, not on calories. And so while the taste satisfaction is related more sometimes to calories, I think that's a learned behavior, the actual apostat is going to respond to volume. And so you need to leave that fiber in there so that the food will trigger the apostat in a more normal way. I had an ear of corn this evening, and if we would have squeezed that and done all that we could, we probably couldn't have made 1/8 of a teaspoon of corn oil out of that. Less than 1/8 of a teaspoon of corn oil. But if I squeeze it, I can eat almost a half a bushel of corn oil at one sitting. Okay, so calories is a problem, but the best way to solve the calorie problem is to deal with, I believe, the foods as grown. Foods as grown contain, by and large, enough fiber and enough volume that they trigger our natural sense of I'm satisfied. Why not eat food that I can eat all I want until I feel satisfied and I won't have too many? Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate your questions. It's been a nice audience.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. That was a wonderful presentation, and I hope you all can watch it again on the Vegetarian Hour on Olelo Channel 52 when Dr. Harris has it ready. It was a fantastic presentation. And I know what you're all waiting for. It's food, and it's back in the kitchen. We cannot eat out here, so go through the line there. And if you could, please help put the chairs away. And we'll see you next month. Thank you for coming.
This program is brought to you by the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii, a nonprofit organization dedicated to sharing with the community the many benefits of a vegetarian diet. Free monthly meetings include vegetarian experts found locally and on the mainland, quick and easy cooking demonstrations, and healthful and delicious food samples. Members enjoy an informative quarterly newsletter, social activities, and discounts at many vegetarian-friendly restaurants and health food stores. For an application, call 944-8344. That's 944-8344. Or visit our website at www.vsh.org. vsh.org.